Right there. Doing good. It just really. Yeah. Very nice. So what do you do? Oh, yes, I know. You have it gets a lot of attention.
In the notes, seeing the next slide, that's nothing that.
No, but if you, no, but it makes more sense.
It's gonna be fine either way.
Well, if you're reading
Without. John? Jennifer, how are you?
Very close. So Chris, I assume you'll forward each slide. So after you welcome, then Cindy, you came. I thought you weren't coming. We got to find a spot for you. Great, perfect. Good. I don't know.
Sit in the corner. You can sit in an empty chair.
Sit over there. Sorry, we
No, I
set
should
it
let
up.
you know.
No, that's
I
fine.
decided yesterday.
I'm delighted. I'm absolutely delighted. So I suspect that that somebody won't be, so we're getting close. So I'm waiting on 1, 2, 3, 4. Four. So anyways, let's make the welcome and introduction, and then I want to talk about the venue and just how we're gonna try to go through the discussion. And then as you and I listen, so are we okay with the phrase, or, if it sounds like, and you get an idea, say, well, how about if we phrase it this way? And then when we get to C2, I'm gonna mention up front that we had the legal review. And then, and that there is one substantive comment. And then when we get to C2, I'll mention that substantive comment if you want. Okay. So, all right. Hello, Will. There's Rick. I think you're over there, maybe Rick. And Linda. Wow. Wow. And Linda. Okay, so Mary Jo, and then again, we never really got confirmation. Maybe Shane's gonna come, in which case, can you slide over a little bit and we'll fit him there if he were to come. And I have his here, so. All right, I think we can get started, and we're just have one that may not come, so. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, we're recording. Well, this is a momentous occasion. We have made it to meeting number 8 and the conclusion of the advisory committee's charge to put together a plan to present to council and the mayor. Certainly. So thanks again, everyone, for coming, and thank you in the audience for coming too. We appreciate your attendance. Tonight's meeting is the last number 8 out of 8 of the advisory committee. So we started out with about 27 members. Tonight we have quite a few, a night around 17 or 18 people here. So it's the committee members have really put in a lot of time and effort over the last, it's been a whole year of meetings. And so tonight we will go through the final edits of the plan. As you know, Chip and Sandra contacted each and every one of the advisory committee members over the last couple of weeks since the town hall meeting. to ask individually what your thoughts and comments were, any sort of additional comments or edits that you had. And everyone also filled out a prioritization form. So tonight we're going to first go through the edits that we have made to the plan, which you received last Saturday. And we'll go through them slide by slide. And then once we're through that, we will go on and go through the priority ranking. As you know, the town hall audience did a similar exercise where they were given all of the goals and the objectives with the strategies listed underneath and asked to prioritize those. And the advisory committee had the same exercise without first seeing what the town hall results were. So tonight we'll go through and so that you can see how the committee as a whole ranked the objectives in comparison to the town hall, the residents at the town hall meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chip.
Great. Well, again, from my perspective, welcome. Just a long process. I apologize for the venue. We work, it takes a lot of work to find out a time that everybody can meet. And we quite frankly failed to double check what would be available when we finally locked in on this date that worked for everybody, and then found that the upstairs was already booked. So we are down here. So it's not ideal for if people are wanting to listen online or for the audience. I apologize for that, but we didn't want to go back and have to work back through that whole calendar again. So you will also notice that Sandra Turner is not here. On Sunday afternoon, she was playing pickleball right out here, and her feet got caught up going back for a shot, and she fell and broke her hip. Luckily, she only had to have a pin put in. When I say luckily, she didn't have to have a full hip replacement. Obviously, it's not, she did have surgery yesterday. I don't know when she's going to get checked out of Hillcrest. But she actually, one of the other constraints was she was leaving tomorrow morning for a wonderful trip to California, obviously had to cancel that. So I think the surgery went well. She is recovering, but I can tell you she's not happy, and not that she can't be here, because she was very much looking forward to this. So, so Chris just went through the format of the meeting. I will add that in addition to getting the comments and et cetera from each of the advisory committee members, that we did also get a few comments and things from the town hall meeting, which we tried to incorporate. So it's a lot of a lot of fine tuning, we think, to the plan at this point. Chris has gone through the menu. By the way, the agenda. I do apologize that the material was sent to you on Saturday. That is on Sandra and I. We kept working to try to get the input from each of you, and in fact, got some even late last week. So we were constantly waiting to make sure we got as much input as we could. So that was on us, and I apologize. I know everybody really liked to get the material early, but hopefully it wasn't that much material and you were able to go through it. So what we're going to do is literally go through each edit and just see what your take is on it. See if it makes sense to you, and if you have any other, if it doesn't make sense or whatever. When there may be an edit or two that will give rise to maybe some further discussion, we want to make sure that we get through all of the edits. So we're thinking, Chris and I talked, and what we may do as we get in, if there's some further discussion, to say, well, look, we're going to table the discussion on this particular for now. Let's get through the rest of the edits, and then we'll know how many we need to come back to talk through. So we know how much time we have, because we don't want to, get bogged down and suddenly find we only got 5 minutes left to go through everything else. So we certainly, if there's more discussion, we want to make sure we get that covered, but we also want to try to cover things. So One additional thing, we had the suggestion that had been given that we ought to have an expert lawyer on zoning look through the plan and just see if there's anything in the plan that would any implications relative to our current zoning codes. We got that information back yesterday. Apologies, actually, I wanted to bring up exactly what he said, and my phone went quiet on it. So this is from Todd Hunt. He's our law director, but he took Bruce Rinker's place in leading the, I don't know what his responsibility is in Northeast Ohio relative to zoning, but he's viewed as an expert on zoning. And this is what his response was in general. I think the suggested zoning issues for review and consideration of amendments to the code are reasonable and defensible if challenged. Additionally, the suggested revisions may make the zoning regulations more defensible if challenged. So there wasn't anything that was troubling or concerning to him. There was one specific point that he felt did represent a substantive change to zoning. And when we get to that point, as we go through tonight, I will mention that and just want to alert you guys that he thought this was a substantive change and make sure whether you guys are comfortable that you understood the magnitude of that change or not, to see if you're still comfortable with it. So with that, we are going to start plowing through. And obviously, it's an open forum for any of you to just comment, and we're just going to start going through what Chris has done is we've just, from a slide standpoint, we're just going to put up each section where there's our edits and just to see. And no, that's fine. No, if you have the first one. So what the comments were here, just the wage earning was it was anybody moving into the village probably is younger. There was a little bit redundant. So, and that just troubled some people. So it made sense to take it out. And then the small town values, actually, it's got a surprising number of comments that just somehow didn't quite sit well. So don't know if that's the right wording to say small town neighborly feel, trying to obviously capture some of the attributes. So I don't know if people have other thoughts than the word neighborly feel or small town something. There's something here that I think, came out in all kinds of discussions and comments about the nature of our culture. So generally comfortable if we use the word neighborly feel, or that captures it better than values. Okay. We are moving along. I'm sorry. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Valid point. Okay. By the way, this is exactly what we envisioned is, that kind of, the stuff that's in here wasn't put in idly, but so when we take something out or edit it, it's not trying to treat it lightly, but just, yes, Aaron. Um, don't know what to say. I don't recall how much discussion on that particular thing. I'm not trying to do this, but. Okay,
Let's get it.
okay. All right, we'll move on to objective A1. So I know that there was some recent further comments from a resident on that interpreted this a particular way. The comment is because really what the two strategies in objective A1 cover are two different ways to preserve property in our village, one through the land conservation and the other through what would be the right phrase, Chris?
So private land that's still is preserved, restricted, development
Yes, but doesn't take it off the tax rolls.
without public money.
Right. So that was the clarification that was suggested to be added. So there's been some commentary that it's not being interpreted quite that way. So I don't know what your reaction is to this, to what was written here as a suggested additional edit. Absolutely.
So this is a small debate about the context. And I think there's some conclusion. We have a 5 acre house, we have a house up. We decide we want to put conservation use within 2 acres. It may not lower the tax value of that property at all. Because you still have a house. So the implication conservation reasons always lower the tax value. It's not correct. Secondly, a lot of people have said, we don't want to change our policy. I think that seems to be almost unanimous. But they've also said that under the right circumstances, we wouldn't be able to use a conservation development district. Right. If it was the right place, depending on that. And I can see that what we've done with the existing recommendation is to leave the conservation development district basically as it is. You have to leave a minimum of 25 acres. You can only build as many houses as you can build under standard zoning restrictions, which let's say would be 5 houses per 25 acres. And you have to have a minimum of 50% conserved land. Now, what's interesting about that is we put that district language into our zoning 20 to 25 years. And we've never had a single development that's take advantage. If you ask yourself why, the answer is very simple. It's not economic. If you have 25 acres, and you have a choice between putting in 5 houses and clustering together versus building out 5 separate 5 acre lots, larger homes, swimming pools, tennis courts, whatever you want. Developers going to do that. So I wanted just to make sure that everybody understands what the current zoning is. Why? Currently, the there are 5 units, not 5,000 parcel, and you serve 50%, you're left with all of that is well. Divide that by 5 houses, and you're really talking about 2.5 acres per house, which is what you see up in the field. So, you know, that is not a cluster development. 2.5 acres, plus is a lot of acres per house. So one of the things that I just wanted to throw, and I'm not recommending this, I just want people to say this isn't good. You could have the same 25-acre minimum lot size and say, we want you to serve 70%, not 50%, 70%. That would leave me with 7.5 acres to go. If you said that you could put 10 houses, in other words, double the density, you'd end up with 0.75 acres per house. That is more of a cluster development. Now, I'm not proposing one solution versus the other. All I'm saying is that if you leave the code the way it is, you will never have a conservation program. It doesn't make any sense. So that's all I have to say.
I will, it's not my role to opine. I will comment that was interesting in the discussion with the lawyer today. That he talked about this specific zoning code, chapter 1160. He did offer an additional possible explanation for why we might not have seen much, and that is that the way the code is currently written, that a developer actually has to go through several steps and does a lot of work and take a lot of time to then have to go to council to see if they can get approval. And that's a pretty tall hurdle. And what this language proposes is to make it effectively a variance, doesn't have to go through a whole zoning change. And that he thought that would potentially make things a bit easier for a developer that would otherwise just revert to developing the individual acres, 5-acre lots. So it supplements what Nat is saying now. Maybe again, under the banner that maybe we park that and then we can come back to it because that's substantive. Certainly the word sprinkled throughout the plan says that there's nothing in this plan that increases density versus what's already in the code, and that would be a change. So I think it would warrant further discussion if this group wanted to evaluate that. So you actually moved forward to the specific strategy A12, Nat. I want to come back to what I believe is up here, which is this clarification language that, it's just the banner under objective A1, but at the same time, it is important to keep in mind that generally about 80% of the village's general revenue comes from real estate taxes and income taxes. As such, there is a limit to how much land can be publicly preserved open space. The following strategies provide ways to balance the long-term fiscal and ecological health of the village and residents' quality of life via a combination of preserved land that is publicly held and preserved privately owned property. So it's a long couple of sentences, but it was just meant to put in that there's a little bit of balance in here that needs to be kept in mind on the effort to preserve and protect, as objective A1 says, preserve and protect and enhance the natural environment and habitat of the Chagrin River Valley. So I'm just waiting for, yes, Sharon.
if I may. So that, something that, we did gather information on real estate taxes, real estate values. In particular, I sent Chip a text this morning or an email this morning based on the research that we had done. And, between 2018 and 2022, based on the records available from the state of Ohio, there was approximately $7 million in new construction that shows on the tax rolls, and over $8 million of adjustments made where people went to the Board of Adjustments to ask for a decrease in their tax value, their valuation, I should say. They're including land that was reclassified from residential property to agricultural property, so that value is reduced. And land that was taken out of private ownership and acquired and become tax exempt. So that is one of the reasons perhaps why the needle hasn't moved much, that as residential property has either been reduced in valuation for a variety of reasons, or has been reclassified, that whatever new construction you have experienced has been keeping it neutral, your valuation neutral.
There's another thing is that many of those new constructions, based on the survey, are actually homes that have been demolished and then replaced with brand new, which are much more valuable than the homes. And I can think at least a half a dozen major developments for the houses something much nicer.
So again, remember that we picked up these comments, we fed them to Chris. Chris is proposing this sort of, it's just at the same time as she started the phrase. Sharon has commented that there can be an interpretation that says this is promoting or suggesting that we should have more development. What are other people's read on this? We can leave this edit out. We can, modify it or tweak it if that's how it's interpreted.
It's the market value. It's the change in valuation that the state regulates. So. I understand. I understand the math. But yes.
I guess my question, what was the impetus of this?
There were more than one person who was concerned that the plan did not talk about the need for future tax revenue. And so that there was, the term balance was one term that was used to make sure there's a balance in the preservation of land with private property.
Yes, Rob.
I just don't hear this phrase to me as if they were doing that at all. It's just saying. We want to keep a balance. I mean, this is something I've been saying from day one. I mean, do we just want everything conserved? Or do we want land actually kept on the tax rolls? It's like at some point there has to be. A point where you're not putting the burden on all the other taxed property because so much of it is in. On a tax exempt status because it's under, it's under the Land Conservancy. So I don't understand what the problem is. This is just, this isn't promoting development. Why? I don't understand why these sentences promote development. On page 3. Well, I love the way it is too, but if we keep going, just more and more will be conserved and then more of the tax burden is going to be on the rest of us. So I don't understand why this. Of the 700 acres. Services. Only half of it is owned by the service. The rest is private property. Stations. And in many cases, as I said, that conservation is a lot of it's part of the private. Doesn't affect the value at all. And what does it lower the cost? It doesn't lower the economic value. So, my reaction to, I mean, I didn't object to this. While we were finding. My question is, why was this pulled? It just sounds like it's kind of necessary.
I'm somewhat about it too, but the thing it looks like is there are other aspects of our plan that talk about development. And this is in the section that preserves protection and compensation that is saying, but don't do it. And that's what there are other parts of our plan that the fiscal reality of the village and of course the tax property tax. There's other aspects of the deep village. So why within the subjective but it's not that. That it just doesn't fit. And I feel like the rest of the plan but
Yes, Rob.
Come at it from a little bit of a different standpoint. I read those 2 sentences. The top, we never talked about it. And then it's a high point. Standard property. It's everything that something about taxes and this how the yeah, I thought that maybe you were that we have some thoughtful thing to say about that. So I would like so I really appreciate this. Here's the statement. This like that's as such,
Let me try that. If you take out the first 2 sentences, what you're left with is a statement that would just be attached that says the following strategies provide ways to balance the long-term fiscal and ecological health of the village and residents' quality of life via a combination of preserved land that is publicly held and preserved privately owned properties. How does that one ring if we just leave that in? Okay. Yep. All right. While Nat has commented about 1160, and we'll come back on that, we're going to move on to some edits to the language in strategy A12. And I can say personally, and I heard it from a number of you, and I've heard it from others outside of the committee, there was some interpretation from this that it was changing some of the impediments or steps that you'd have to go through to qualify for what was intended in 1160. And so the edits that are in here, just want to reemphasize that there's nothing in strategy A12 that would not increase the number of dwelling units currently permitted as determined by the existing requirements for a yield plan. It adds the phrase as confirmed by a yield plan. In contrast, land that is purchased via residents' tax dollars by the Land Conservancy as permanent open land becomes tax exempt and no longer is assessed real estate taxes. I don't know if that's consistent with your understanding, Nat, or Rob, or Linda, the members of the Land Conservancy. Just going through the other language. The regulations provide a density neutral development option. And at the end there, district that requires rezoning, but still retains all of the other zoning requirements for conservation development. So again, it's just fundamentally takes it out of a formal zoning change, which would go to council, possibly even the voters, if that were ever decided. And instead leaves it at the planning and zoning level that they would meet all of the requirements accordingly is fundamentally what's proposed here. So we can come back to whether 1160, changing it or, further changing it. But I guess at this point, I'm just these edits to clarify further what was intended here. Is that okay or not? All of the edits, I believe, Chris, that are proposed here don't change anything. They just re-emphasize what was intended. Just strengthens and makes it clear.
So we can clarify that.
Okay. By the way, well, I don't want to conjecture the group because this meeting is transpiring exactly as we hoped, but I think we're in some of the more difficult parts here, but so I'm again just trying to stick with the edits, and then we can come back at a later point and talk about 1160 in general if we want. Any other change? That's going to come up, not in here.
No, the Conservation Development District does allow for the attached houses. Right, it's not mentioned.
Does? I thought they had to be 200 feet apart.
No, you can have 2 and 3 units attached.
Oh, okay. 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 All right, we'll assume that with those two little additional edits, and again, we'll put that on the list to come back and talk in general. So we're gonna move on to strategy A41. You have that up now. We're gonna come back to this question of the diversity of residents and come back to the 1160. Right. In general, yes, we're just going through the language changes, but Nat suggested some aspects. I was responding to Nat's comments about should you guys evaluate, further changing what's here. And well, I'm aware that there are some, but the committee has at this point been comfortable with the language that's in here, so we're not reopening, and I'm not sure that I'm gonna just raise the question, do you guys really want to start reopening fundamental things like making a change in density that would increase density in the village? Because it's been pretty consistent throughout that there's nothing in here that increases density, so Nat proposed that, but we can address that right now. You're proposing taking it out. That's a rather fundamental change. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Right. Right. Yes, well, that's the language that's in there that stays in. That didn't come up from anybody's comment that they wanted to see that taken out. I mean, not anyone, but it didn't come up from a variety of people. It would be whatever the restrictions are here, that they would have the right to do that, yes. Okay, that's what that section suggests, is that let's take the 110 acres or whatever the size of that property is, and if this language were adapted by council, go ahead, Chris, explain what the big change would be versus today.
So the suggestion was, instead of, and this gets back to what Todd Hunt had mentioned in terms of all the hoops that a developer has to jump through before going through a rezoning process. So the suggestion was that instead of making it a rezoning, it is an option within the U1A1 district. So all of the rules stay the same, but it becomes an approval by the planning commission without going through the rezone, without becoming a zoning map change, an amendment process. It would remove the zoning change, the zoning amendment process that's in the zoning code right now. It would remove that step that is a legislative action. That is correct. But you can also do a council confirmation as a quasi administrative decision, such as a conditional use, rather than a rezoning. If the rationale behind that is that if a developer, a property owner proposes 5 houses on 25 acres and they follow every single rule within the zoning code, then what is the justification for turning it down? And if it is turned down at council level or council approves a rezoning and then it goes on a referendum, then you have to justify that turning down an application that complies with every aspect of your zoning code.
Let's just,
My understanding is that I've been told there have been 5 applications for a conservation development district and not one of them has complied with the code.
just, all the comments that I've heard, and I agree that there's a lot of comments about this. Remember that if you have 2 choices developing a property, split it into 5 acres, put a road down the middle and build lots of houses versus do what's intended here, you end up with a whole lot more green space and conserved property than the alternative. And since we haven't ever seen this, as Nat pointed out, ever actually taken place, that was the original reason that this came in, was this was pointed out that it doesn't seem to be working, right? And this was the suggestion on maybe this would make it a little more, facilitate making it work a little better so that maybe you would end up with more green space. It doesn't result in any more houses than you were going to get otherwise. It doesn't suddenly say, oh, well, now that I can do this, I can get a lot of houses versus before I couldn't. You'd get the same number that you would have had you not pursued this and no more. So that was the intent. It was a green space, more conservation, more conserved property than otherwise. So that was, I believe, as I has always understood it, the intent here. So it's not, but if people are confused or concerned or just think, we're late in the process, so we can just delete it. We can put a caveat statement in that, concerns have been raised or whatever. I've talked with Chris about this, that's possible to do at something like this, to just say there were concerns raised. But so I'm not trying to opine on anything. It's up to what you guys want to do. If you want to leave it in. So. Well, that doesn't change. There's no aspect of this that would change how careful it would have to be looked at. Okay, as far as oversight, okay. If I say anything more, it sounds like I'm trying to defend something. I'm not. I guess I'd like to get the resolution, it can just be stricken. The whole thing can be taken out and
I guess my recommendation would be leave the 1116 conservation development district code as it is. And not bring it up in context to this many places because it is complicated.
Then let me propose this, because I'm going to build on something that Sharon said. It sounds like, some of the comments around the table that, it is a little confusing and certainly seems to be a surprise that it takes away a whole layer. How about if this just changes to whatever the right language, but that this should be looked at more carefully to see if there are ways that could achieve the goal of achieving more green space without increasing the density. And evaluate there's impediments in this that could be evaluated. Well, that. Well, council may know a lot of these things are there. That's not the question. It's what the advisory committee wants to recommend. It just isn't working today as the premise here. And so do you want to say anything that, it's just a much softer statement to just dig in and figure out, what is it that is or isn't working, and is there something that should be changed, given, I will tell you that Todd did say today that this was in 2007, this was put in place, and it was gut wrenching to get it through. When I was here. Yeah, I was a resident, but I don't remember any of this. I don't know if you were active in it, Nat, but so. So it is a sensitive thing, as Sharon has said. Rob?
We're all reacting to this idea of removing a layer of, call it over. It's really fast, it's not, the fact, the way it's written is in its own terms, it makes it a bit more likely and complicated to work. What people really care about is just that there's a consent. So if you go with the suggested topic, we need to keep thinking about it. The point is, specific that doesn't say anything about the result. Right. Isn't that where we are already? It sounds like the reason. Why, that's what I'm suggesting. Changing it. They even told where it is. I believe that the prior process consent.
Yeah, I think what Rob is saying is that this requires a whole new zoning. And he's saying if you took that out, but still in the process, that any final decision required consent from council, you've kept that in. But now we're getting to a specific recommendation, and I'm keeping it one level above that just says.
I think that, to Rob's point about not using technical language and just, in making sure that the text says that however it is approved, however the approval process is, whatever it is, it includes council's oversight by giving them that authority to confirm a decision of the planning commission, or however, right, to keep that step.
I think if there's a way, I think it makes sense to preserve more green space, but everybody. And there's certain pros with that. Okay, that's what I.
Renovate. All kinds of roadblocks. Trying to do something.
Right, right. So I guess the good discussion. Do you want Chris to propose something, and I will see how, I can send it around and see if there's any other reaction, but do you have a sense of how you might rephrase this to make it a little more general? And is that a good?
Because there were two comments that I thought really made it very clear. Rick.
Mitch, you should turn yours around too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm gonna try to move on. These are good, very good. So page 10, the language that was in there, strengthen and increase awareness of the village's external lighting standards. Just a little embellishment, consider enhancing the current regulations to address the preference for warm tone lighting, as was characteristic of incandescent lighting, as opposed to cooler tones such as LED lighting, which is often bluer and brighter. This is especially important to maintain the historic ambiance of the village center as well as the rest of the community. It's just again, a comment about, this was a fairly light statement in the plan and could it be strengthened a little bit? So that was the proposal to do that. We okay? Yay, moving on. All right. All right. So I can tell you this one's actually near and dear to me on solar panels. I will just tell you that as background, we've had 2 solar panel issues come to planning and zoning within the last 12 months. And it was really quite a challenge for planning and zoning because the current ordinance is crystal clear that you can't put a panel on your roof that can be visible from the street. And we had to deny somebody, I think it was just 2 meetings ago. It didn't mean that they couldn't put them on other aspects of their roof, but it reduced the amount of panels, which reduces the amount of electricity that, can be generated, which causes change in the economics, et cetera. So, this was just, again, the dilemma, and what you guys are trying to say in this plan is, give a lot of thought to solar panels. It runs right in, by the way, they reviewed it with architecture review, they reviewed it with historic, and it was soundly, and the architects that advised, and it was soundly said, no, we don't want to change. When we got done with the planning and zoning meeting, the representative for the resident was the solar panel company, and he said after the decision, he said, well, I've been running into this in a lot of different communities about wanting to restrict seeing solar panels, making them visible. So they are working on technology, et cetera. So this was just a phrase to add that what's recommended in here is in line with the sustainability guidelines for historic buildings, and just I think further emphasizes that this is something that needs to be given careful consideration. Is that a fair way to say it, Chris? The added language. And that's why that next statement's in there. At the same time, the village should monitor solar technology improvements. Don't know what the cost is, don't know what the efficiency or anything at the moment. Sean?
I mean, the new thing, but like I really don't understand how what's in the strategy so narrow. Within the lifetime of this plan, the entire fleet of General Motors vehicles are going to be electric. And the entire process, how I hear folks talk about solar panels, is about like from a historic one. There isn't even a historic district that's like village lot. The default in our community is no solar.
No visible from the street.
We could seriously all walk outside of the building, but really very little architecture. Most of it is covered by asphalt. The predominant visual, you are not looking at the front elevation, is asphalt. Look out that window right there and see the same thing. The default position of our community right now is no solar panels. And it is, and it is out of touch with where we should be today, certainly out of touch with where we're gonna be with the language. And that the strategy recommendation, which are all kind of counts to consider. So they're not, it needs a zoning change. Right, so it isn't really gonna change anything except that perhaps direct council to take.
It's an ordinance, yeah. This effectively either tries to modify or point it out. So,
But this document is actually saying that, right?
no, it's a recommendation to take this into consideration.
Right,
Yes.
and we're talking about, maybe we should put things on auxiliary stuff, right? Which is that odds with other parts, and that says, cut down some more trees, to make sure you're getting enough light on the garage. That's like, there's nothing in here that suggests solar panels are gonna become more valuable for people to be exempted. Like, not something. It is, the default position is, don't do it unless it fits in the level. There's nothing that can advocate that really.
So that's a good point. Maybe we should have the default position up. It says,
Exactly.
allow solar panels accepted where it's going to be noxious to the environment.
And by the way, like, you think about, like, home value, the fact that we can't do it now is not, like, you think it's preserving our home value. It is going to be doing the opposite and preparing your, the fact that we can do it is going to be suppressed.
Okay, so just if that's a sentiment here, this is fairly gentle or ginger, tiptoe around and maybe you can, tweak a few things here. Or you guys want to reverse that and say, consider, steps that would, be in tune with the,
Think about it. I see where you're going. We're trying to establish that now. What are the changes to permit? Wow, on flat.
Instead of noxious, it could be.
Right.
It could be out of character with the. And just pick up what Sean said, I've changed.
I really struggle with it. I mean, look at the roof on, I apologize, I don't have to look at it. But look at the roof of like people building before you go on a set. It is literally the worst quality roofing material you can put on a structure. You can put metal structures. You can put metal roofing. I was gonna bring an asphalt to go. They crumble in your face. Like what we are saying. The historic charm in our community does not rest in our asphalt. It is here, and it's an important part of the important part of why we live here in our community, and why we want the house.
okay.
It is not exemplified by our roofing.
Okay, so Chris, what should we do here? A rewrite of this, make it stronger and pass it around and get some feedback? And because we're not going to plan to get another advisory committee meeting unless you all love getting together, but we'll just send it around and see if there's additional comments. Does that make sense? Do you think you got a sense here?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right. Environmentally friendly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. So these next areas were simply, thank you, Lindsay. Sorry that she couldn't stay longer. So in strategy C21 and C22, just wanted to clarify that the zoning that's being talked about here is minimum lot size requirements. If you stand back to this whole plan and from the very beginning, the concerns about, is this plan going to be getting into changing our 5 acre zoning is what you heard a lot This just reiterates that retain the existing residential zoning minimum lot size requirements for all those other districts, and in the village center, maintain the U1A4 zoning district minimum lot size requirements. So it just was put in to just clarify that this is talking about lot size requirements from zoning. And then just wanted to, again, clarity for some questions that came up about that in the U1A4, that it's not permitting an increase in the number of lots currently permitted by code. Now, this is the point at which I want to mention, because this came up, and I apologize because we don't have the language, so this gets into the word attached. Even though it is in the 1160 code, currently in C22. You don't have it all in front of you, but C22 sub B for the U1A4 parcels that are north of the bridge and the concentration of commercial and government buildings, consider modifying the zonings to allow a limited number of housing units to be attached while maintaining the density that would otherwise be allowed. The lawyer reviewing this from a zoning perspective said that is a substantive change. And so I bring that to your attention when the word attached comes in. Did everybody understand when that was talked about and put in, that even if you were, cognizant of it, that is that substantive of a change? And if you think it's appropriate and willing to have that magnitude of change, it can be in, but if not, then it can be just taken out. Yes, sir. That's a good question, Sharon, and I don't think I can answer that other than, there's really nothing else in these areas that would, changing setbacks.
Would it substitute? The change would be. The word of the change would be the fact that
the language, if that change were made, that would be a substantive change to zoning. Not changing side lot setbacks or front lot setbacks. There's some merit to making that consistent throughout. He made the comment that given how many variety there are in setbacks, side lot and side setback and front setbacks today in the village center, that trying to make that a little more consistent. That's not a substantive change and wouldn't give rise, but this. No. Well, no, I don't, not per se. He, every time I ask that question, that, some people feel that once this plan is finalized and delivered, that now this becomes a law of the land. If nothing else is ever said and something comes up in a court battle 5 years from now, they can refer to this. And that he said, yeah, that certainly can happen. It's not a red flag to him. He's just didn't know if the committee understood that that's just throwing the word in. Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, attached or fine. That's pretty substantive compared to everything else that's in the zoning code. The language just says consider modifying the zoning to allow a limited number of housing units to be attached. So this is attaching housing units. I don't know how, I don't know if that could be interpreted. That's just.
Maybe because it's so vague. We don't know what it means, does it say it?
Right. And I don't know. I don't know, Sharon. It's a very good question. His word was it's substantive. So, you know, if somebody would take off on that basis, I don't.
Round the table, no idea. Attorney said that is a substance. I don't know how. Yeah, I'll go back. I'm not an attorney, so what does that mean?
Rob? It doesn't matter, I know.
My recollection from this in Chip's, we were at the school and it was Chip's group where Chip, I believe that was when you were talking about the considering the possibility of townhouses in the village center. So my recollection is the word townhouse was used. And the reason it's in here as consider is because there was not a clear consensus. I think Sandra's group said no to the townhouse, no to the attachments. And now I could be misinterpreting this, but my recollection was that.
I'm not going to quibble. I will take, since Sandra's not here, I can say it was her group that wanted attachment and my group didn't, but I have no idea. So. In our group, and I will tell you my understanding from Sandra was that she felt that there was in her group, and so when this was kicked around, but I agree in our group, it was certainly a lot of discussion and there wasn't consensus, so. All right, so we'll take it out. All right. Great. All right, sorry I didn't have more material for that. As I said, it came up in the call today with him this morning, so. Could be. All right, so we are just progressing right through now, so. Just strengthening on D12, we're moving on. That some people just wanted to reiterate that, you know, it's come up so many times, but you know, that the village property, particularly between the village structure and the river, that, you know, the village ought to be encouraged to look at what doing with that. I can tell you personally, as a council person, I have now gone and stood by the service garage looking at the dumpsters towards the river. And it is. And so I think what we're going to do is just put some flowers on the dumpsters and make them look a lot more attractive. And I think we'll meet the requirements here, but there's a lot of space, you know, but don't tell the service department that I've looked at it, because of course they probably feel they need every square inch of what they have, but there's a lot of vehicles parked around that don't need to be there, et cetera. So, so the language was added just to make that much more clear. So hopefully that's doesn't change anything, just further strengthens. So, okay, so the communications, I think there was a few people that, you know, just felt that this needed to be further strengthened, and we keep hearing it about it's basically the pink sheet, but so the phrase here, Gates Mills communicates with residents primarily via the village website and the pink sheet, but lacks a greater variety communication. Maybe there's a little language there. Lacks a greater variety communication methods than often provided by other communities. With rapid advancements in technology, there's a growing need to use a greater variety of communication methods to reduce a more diverse group of residents and prospective residents. And then the language that talked about marketing to prospective residents was kind of buried and yet had come out in the interviews with the realtors back in the beginning. And in fact, was pointed out that today, when a prospective buyer wants to look for houses and it's a house in Gates Mills, they just get to the house, but there's nothing that comes up on Gates Mills, whereas in a lot of communities, particularly Zillow does this. When you click on a house in a community, a lot of attributes about the community come up as an example. So the sense was to maybe broad that. So this is an addition to the plan. It's a refinement because it was maybe slightly implied by some of the general language, but this just basically talks about what really came out of the outside perspectives report. So I don't know that there's anything particularly controversial here, but everybody's okay with further end doing this. All right. Oops, keep the order here. So, you know, the only point on the road construction was, again, came out pretty strongly on the priorities, et cetera, but continue to utilize and periodically update the village's strategy for road construction and maintenance by carefully balancing the need to improve the roads relative to the financial strength of the village. You know, when the comment was brought up that that's just kind of a throwaway statement, I will tell you that I made the statement to Chris. Well, we've actually have been doing a lot in the last year, and that's what this additional language recently, the village created a new roadway assessment program. And our goal is to make systematic upgrades so that every road in the village is in good condition. So it basically says we're working on it, but yes, Mitch. They didn't do this roadway assessment program, but they are, you know, their River Road's being done completely from one end to the other, and it's going to be widened a little bit. So, but they took it down to the studs like they did on County Line there a couple of years ago. And that was the 8 mil levy that they put on the books to do that. So I know that only because when we evaluated the village engineer function, we evaluated their village engineer last year and they described what they were doing over there. So this is just further clarification of, you know, and again, as we saw, you know, road maintenance is a high priority and important to everybody. And we just wanted to add this emphasis. So I don't think there's anything controversial, presumably. So, and I guess strategy F11 is new, because it was pointed out again, we get this resoundingly. It came out in the priorities. It's come out in all basis that our safety services are viewed by residents as excellent, and shouldn't we be doing more to bring that to people's attention? And so that's what this section added. Again, don't know that there's anything particularly controversial.
Oh, we did add the tree and
what you could do is reference it in the other one and say, and see strategy F11. So we get in both spots. Okay, here we go to Mayfield Schools. So this was trying to just further comment about what the language that was in there regarding the Mayfield schools and particularly elementary school. And just to re-emphasize that, you know, while, as you can read here, while the village recognizes that it has no control over the school district's use of its facilities, the elementary school is in a prime location in the village center, conveniently located near a number of other community buildings and gathering spaces, and the village has a vested interest in ensuring the building remains a vibrant contributor to the village center. So this was, I think, and there's been a lot of discussion, I believe, and from variety about, it's, if it's always going to be an elementary school, then I don't think anybody's, that's what it's going to be. But if it's not, whatever, this is meant to say, well, just let's not lose track that it's a very valuable, it happens to say building. But yes, Sharon, I know you have thoughts on this.
How about changing the school?
There's a vested interest in,
Instead of vested interest in ensuring the building needs and vibrant facility. School.
but again, we start right up by saying that we recognize we have no control over the school district's use.
I'm dead against showing any indication that the other floors do. I think that's not very interesting. If the village, a lot of people send their kids to school, be upset. Other uses for the field, which is what this involves.
And it singled it out. I mean, there's far more to say that about. I mean, it's like, it was a regular amount of.
Well, Well, I mean, the strategy statement says work with the Mayfield City School District to ensure that Gates Mills Elementary School remains a valued community resource. What if we just change that to school, it's just a reiteration of what the statement said, which is fine, but we've already said it. So okay, I mean, this was, again, just trying to address some members of the committee that felt that, we just need to put a stake in the ground that that happens to be in a rather strategic location. So in addition to being important as a school, if it weren't to be, I think was the intent. Yes. I can tell you, I personally missed that meeting as well. So Sandra would have to, yeah, but you will, Chris. But the town hall. Oh, I'm sorry, the town hall at the school. There wasn't anything particularly discussed about it. No, that was all coming up with the priorities. I'm sorry, I've misinterpreted the question. Okay.
I recommend it's changing the last line of sentence. Building a school.
Go ahead, Sharon. What do you? Well, we certainly. Okay, we're going to take it out. All right. So the last here is the eliminate the power outages, including the possibility of burying the power lines. And we certainly have been hearing that, and it certainly jumped out at the town hall. This was just to further consideration, because just the task, we don't want to leave the impression that you could go around and bury power lines throughout the village. I mean, you could, but it's incredibly expensive. But consider that maybe in only needed in certain areas that would impact a large number of the residents and be an efficient use of the dollars. So So this was just embellishing the strategy. Yes, yes. Buried power lines, but only from the street to your house. Yes. So that typically isn't where the issue is. It's when. Right. And so, and we, I can tell you from a council perspective, we certainly hear that, there are areas that just incur extreme power outages compared to other areas in the village. If I made the statement that First Energy.
Several.
That, again, would be an example where maybe that's beneficial to bury those if it affects a large number and is happening a lot. So, and quite frankly, this would require stepping up with First Energy that, quite frankly, just says, oh, yeah, we're looking at it. Oh, yes.
Very frequently, but that's somewhat.
Well, that's good to hear.
But it's still an issue.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of our neighbors have generated. I think. Other.
Okay.
Especially if people work. Yeah. Power. Internet. That.
Oh, yeah. Whoa, that's in the plan, but that we didn't do any further edits. It's in the main plan. Yeah. No, that was just strengthening the power outage point. So, and burying lines. So,
I'd love to.
to, to reduce, if not eliminate. How's that? Right. To reduce, if not eliminate. Okay. So, as I go back through my notes, I think we actually ended up covering strategy A121160. My only note was to potentially come back to attracts new residents and whether we wanted to get into diversity. I know that was brought up in some forms of discussion at some of the advisory committee meetings that I recall, but does anybody feel strongly? Aaron raised it, as opposed to just leaving it attracts new residents. Leave it silent on.
I mean, I would be happy to have, full plan statement, and, I would be totally supportive of that. I think that would be fine. And I think I could just slow down, water it down, you could say, in fact, a variety of residents, but background. I think we could further take small town neighborhoods. So the other, like, after you look at very specific, right? You know what it is. And I think that it is. Small town neighborhoods. So, like a 1200 neighborhood. That's why I said that, and it's welcoming, if it's a good word. Yeah. Fire, yeah.
I know,
Okay, so what's the consensus? What,
Attract and welcome a diverse.
okay, is that, so that's a list under, okay. Attracts, go ahead, what are you saying?
A diverse.
Oh,
A diverse. Welcomes a diverse. You got it, okay? Is that okay? All right, we are running a little,
Keep the bullet, small town neighborly feel.
we okay leaving that in? Okay. All right, this may not, well, I don't want to predict how long this is going to take, but we do. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, and ask for you feedback via email. Okay, and we'll judge it on that basis. And, you know, if there's still a lot of, but I think we've talked this through pretty well. So everybody, good point. That is the follow-up to that. I was going to do one after this next point, but we'll do it there. So everybody understand that there's a couple of those areas, and we'll send this out one more time with the revised language and then ask for your feedback to avoid having a whole separate meeting. So, yeah, good point. Thanks, Kelly. So, two things on the next, which is the priorities. Again, as you're certainly aware, the intent here is that, you know, that you can't do all things all at once. It was very clear, and we got a few comments back. Just make sure that nobody thinks that something that's rated lower, prioritized lower than another doesn't mean it's not also important. You guys have worked hard for all 21 of these objectives to be considered. This is just an attempt. If you know, what do you guys think ought to be done first? So I don't know which, yeah, so that chart shows you, you know, what you're ranking, and we did get, I think, all but one or two members. By the way, we discovered in this final, when we looked back, that there were two members that had kept hoping to be coming to meetings, but just hadn't made really much of any of the meetings, and they agreed that they really weren't part of the process, and so don't consider them as being part of the committee, because they really didn't have a chance. You know, it wasn't they didn't want to, but so of the really officially 23 at the end of the day, and we have, as far as members, I think we heard from 22. So so this was your rankings. And then we've lined up what the town hall, again, as was mentioned to the audience, the advisory committee members did not see what the town hall results were until just when this data was sent over the weekend. So, so if you had a chance to look at the two different charts, I guess I'd just like any particular observations or comments jump out.
I'm good. What my response is, but I'm fine with that. I think what I want to say to you, what I hope like council thinks about, and it's not just like but is looking at all and thinking about like what can I use in the short term, what's more of a long term effort, what needs a sustained and reflective engagement, you know, what are the strategies are they trying to do in 6 months, and this part, you know, this other part is going to take sure. I mean, I think about it, And you're not like it off the list. There's something things about it. So the priority of.
And Sean,
I hope that the practitioners that are gonna think about how they're gonna do it. Not different in the priority.
okay, okay.
But it doesn't, I feel like it's supposed to be too much. You know, there was a lot of. But it, I don't think it means like, oh, we don't. And.
B4 and B2, so
One explanation could be that the town hall, there wasn't a whole lot of explanation for any one of these. And, to be honest, when you looked at what was E1, 2, and 3, they were much more specific and they addressed ways of being sustainable. So at first glance, my reaction was maybe people thought it was someone. No. And I have no idea what the environmental best practices, except there was some explanation within that, the strategies identified, looking at the hillside regulation and the stormwater management. So the fact that they were, again, that made a lot of sense there. I don't.
yeah, I know, that jumped out at me. I was like, whoa, but sure, you got a lot of that. You know, when you look at this other chart, that just shows individually, couple of things, you can see how they're color coded on here on the slide. If you look up there, in the deck that's in front of you, you just.
No, that is the weighted total, so. So if someone gave F1 6, then it was worth 6. If it was rated a 1, it was only worth 1 point. So the total is the total point, for the advisor. And then the average, no, we didn't do for.
Didn't show you that. We calculated it the same way, but
But on this chart here, it does give you, the ranking the average number. So if you were looking at the previous chart here, this is the average. That's, we gave you 6 points, you could rank them 1 through 6. At the town hall, they were given 5-point scale. And so this is now, these numbers are slightly different for the advisory committee because this has been converted to a 5-point scale. But this gives you the relative scoring, average scoring for each of them. Town hall, and then the advisory committee.
So it's just a couple of things noted there when you look at it the way it is on the board and you look at the green, blue and yellow, you get a sense of where a lot of the concentration is in the priorities. And if you can see the lines going up and down in the chart in front of you, those are 0.5-point changes. And you do notice that there's an awful lot of them, that there's very little difference between what the advisory committee prioritized and what the residents prioritized. So that at least jumped out to me. It was like, whoa, this will be an interesting meeting if the viewpoint is drastically different, but it on general look pretty consistent. But yes, Aaron.
Generally. Any of the things at the top of this. All about the but I mean, and one other idea.
That's a specific strategy, of course, is to do that, the bike lane. So
I'm talking about
no. I got it. No, but it's in the plan. So
right. Sorry, one other idea that I. Zoning that we talked about. I'm not a lawyer, so.
Oh, interesting. Wow. That's an interesting idea. I like that.
I just wanted to say my perspective in another.
Well, we've tried very hard throughout the process to try to get as much input, in the questionnaire. Whatever percent, 540 respondents tried to, have things. So never is a perfect process, but at this point in the agenda, I think the only thing to ask is, we asked each of you to submit the priorities. I understand it's, no one person, probably voted exactly the way they've come out here, but that's how you voted. So unless anybody, there is one way to look at it if you wanted to throw that up on the other. So the third one, where you just backed out the two that are ongoing. You had sent that to me, but maybe that's not in there, so. Or is this the one that's ongoing? Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Oh, okay, that's a little hard to read. Is it in their deck on the table?
No.
Okay, all right, that's probably, the point is, I think, to emphasize something that I think you were just saying, Aaron, is that continue excellent safety services and maintain road infrastructure is a little bit of, you know, well, I hope you're doing that because we're sending you our tax dollars every year. So, and if you just pulled those out and then look at the rest of the priorities, it moves a couple of other things up, but, so since we've already asked you for your input, I guess, is there any sentiment that anything should be upon further reflection, to rearrange or, yeah, go ahead, Sharon. That's okay. Do we have agreement? Okay. Sure, Kelly. Yeah. Mhm. Well, just so you know, the next step now, obviously will be to, you know, send back all the edits, including some of the new edits we talked about and get your feedback. Then, Chris is going to finalize and pretty up the plan and submit that to council and the mayor. I know she's got, you know, a lot of other client work, so I don't know the exact timing of that. I believe, I just speak for myself, but my sense is among council members will obviously decide, but I think we're gonna then set up a working session, and given, you know, the nature of things, probably be more than one working session, and so you'll watch it unfold as we evaluate it. So, so in wrapping up, I know the mayor wanted to make a comment or two. Oh, yeah, we're gonna probably be forming committees and and I just want to finish with a particularly special thanks to Chris Hopkins. She has put up with a lot. And from my perspective, has just done a phenomenal job. So I just want to thank her.
I think, Chip and Sandy.
Thank you. So we do have a little token of our appreciation. There's a little bag over here for each of you. If you take one on your way out, it'll be a memento that you'll never forget. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. And thanks for the audience for observing. Thank you.